All right, and we're back. So now that we're kind of at least a little bit refreshed as to where things were happening, um, we're going to jump into the verses here. So starting off here, Exodus chapter 14, verse 2. Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi Haharioth. All right, time to come on back to the verse here. So open up your Bibles and follow along at Exodus chapter 14, verse 2. Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi Hahirot, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal Zephon. You shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, they are wandering in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host. And the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh. And they did so. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people, and they said, "What is this we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us?" So he made ready his chariot and took his army with him, and took 600 chosen chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. And Yahweh hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the people of Israel while the people of Israel were going out defiantly. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them and camped at the sea by Pi Hahirot in front of Baal Zephon. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them. And they feared greatly, and the people of Israel cried out to Yahweh. And we have that cry again, like it begun with a cry, and now it is coming to a close in Egypt with the cries of the Israelites. They said to Moses, "It is because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is it not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." So once again, the people are upset with Moses, and this will happen many more times as they leave Egypt. But it's happened before in the beginning when their tasks and burdens got heavier because of Moses and Aaron coming and Aaron speaking those words of what God was going to do. Now, in the beginning, this was before all the plagues and everything, so Moses was still back to his old self back then, and he was kind of cowardly and fearful, didn't like having to do this in the first place, having to be this person to go down there and lead the people. He didn't like any of this mission, and now he is going to respond much differently than he did back then when all the people were whining like this and being upset at Moses in the plan because of how their work was going to get harder because Pharaoh was upset with them. So, same situation's happening, but Moses is going to respond much differently than he did before by turning on Yahweh last time and saying how upset he was about this whole thing and that he knew it was no good. So, here we go. Let's see Moses' new response from his experiences with God throughout all this. In verse 13 it says, "And Moses said to the people, 'Fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of Yahweh, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. Yahweh will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. Charash. So charash means to be silent or to be still, to be quiet, and it means to be at peace. So he's telling them to be at peace, to not think that they have to battle, but to be calm and cool and collected, as Yahweh, your God, is going to do the fighting for you. Yahweh said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they shall go in after them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host." The host means his armies, his huge mass amount of people. "His chariots and his horsemen, and the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh. When I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen, then the angel of God." But remember, angel is malak, which means a messenger, something that is sent of God. "Then the angel of God who was going before the host of Israel," so host once again means a huge group, "the whole host of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them." Verse 20. "Coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel, and there was the cloud and the darkness, and it lit up the night, without one coming near the other all night." So Yahweh stops the Egyptian chariots and their army from descending down the hill and taking the Israelites, who are now pretty much blocked between the body of water there, the Yam Suf, and they are pinned by the hills. They can't really escape because the Egyptians have the high ground, and so they're coming and surrounding them. I don't know if you guys remember that part. I think this was like our last week of school. We made it to this part, but the pillar of cloud that they had been following has now swung around to the front and is now blocking the way, so that the Egyptians cannot pass through. Verse 21, "Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yahweh drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided." So Moses stretches out his hand. So once again, Moses is now doing and performing the actions, and Yahweh has now sent in a strong east wind that blows across, and it has blown all night. So this wasn't just like Moses like sticks his staff in the water and it explodes. We kind of went over this, that it's not like the movies or the cartoons or the shows where it just looks kind of crazy, but that there's a huge wind that blows in. The huge wind blows in, and it blows all night long, and this huge wind eventually separates the waters. Verse 22, "And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground." So they're walking across that dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. So they have these sides, these walls or fences of water that are next to them, and they are walking through the middle on dry ground. Verse 23, "The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And in the morning watch, Yahweh, in the pillar of fire and of cloud, looked down on the Egyptian forces and threw the Egyptian forces into panic. So, as soon as morning breaks, Yahweh then goes into messing with the Egyptians and throwing them into a panic. Now, we're not told exactly how or what exactly was happening, but he is somehow doing it through the fire and the cloud. Verse 25, clogging their chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. Now, it doesn't say clogging in the Hebrew, but this is a interpretation from some other things as to why they came to the decision that they think it was talking about clogging their wheels, but it actually says it's making their wheels swerve all over the place. So something was messing up the wheels. So it drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from before Israel, for Yahweh fights for them against the Egyptians." So now the Egyptian army is double thinking what they just got themselves into. They didn't know Yahweh was going to fight for them. They just thought the Israelites were confused and stuck. And now they're realizing that was not the case. And they've actually been the ones who have fallen into a disastrous trap. Verse 26. Then Yahweh said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned. So shuv can mean to turn. So the sea turned to its normal course when the morning appeared. And as the Egyptians fled into it, Yahweh threw or shook the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. So they are getting swallowed up by the waters as the waters pour in around them. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen of all the host, so of all the army that was there of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them survived. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall on them on their right hand and on their left. Thus Yahweh saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. So afterwards, as the water returns, their bodies start washing up on the shore. Israel saw the great power of Yahweh, or that Yahweh used against the Egyptians. So the people feared Yahweh, and they believed in Yahweh and in his servant Moses. So they are now trusting. Amen. Remember, amen is the Hebrew word for trust or true. So they trust in Yahweh and what he has done for them and what he continues to do. And they're also trusting in Moses, which they had been sort of back and forth with, but this really sealed the deal for them when they saw this amazing event that came in great power or by a great hand, right? We talked about how in the Egyptian world, in the ancient world, your hands represent how strong you are. And remember, the Egyptians would show the Pharaoh how many hands they had of the enemy they defeated by cutting off the hands from the dead bodies after a battle. And so the hand showed what your power was. And so Yod is the word for power also, because it shows your strength. And remember, Yahweh was saying from the very beginning that he was going to show his hand, and that his hand was going to be Pharaoh's hand. And by a very powerful, great hand, by a strong hand, he would bring them out. And so we see in this last miraculous event the culmination of Yahweh's great hand, his great power. And throughout this, he wants both the Egyptians and the world and Israel to know who he is, that they understand what kind of God this is. This is a God that is like no other God. This is a God who can control everything, who has power over everything, and is greater than everything. He is above all of this, outside of all of this, and can control all of this. And this is what they are seeing and experiencing, and giving them the real knowledge of who Yahweh is through all these experiences. Both the Egyptians and the world later is hearing of what's going on in Egypt, and we'll see that in their reactions when the Israelites arrive in Canaan, how everybody's scared of them because they heard what happened to the Egyptians. So all that's happening. But all that's being taught through these events that Yahweh is doing here.